What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over loading screens and loading symbols. So they are a little bit different. In this case I'll show you what a loading symbol is, or a loading icon. So if I load this and I put an arbitrary delay so you can see how it works. Now before we go any farther, just so you know, we are using level streaming, so this is actually loading, and it's keeping something animated and moving for the player while the load actually is occurring. It's not like all those tutorials where they say put a delay in and use open level. This is actually using level streaming, and we set that up in the previous episodes. So this is truly loading, and it's a true loading icon. But that's just something. That's an example. We can have a loading icon in case we have a long load, like this. Okay. Or we can actually have a loading screen. I've set up both methods with tips. So if I do this again, and I still have my arbitrary delay in here, then you can have tips that get randomized every time you start up a fight. So something like that. So you can have either a loading screen with a picture and some tips, or you can have a loading icon that plays and displays the scene in the background. Either way is fine. Whatever you want to do, you can do a lot more with it than I did. I didn't even really put an image on my loading screen. I just put a black image, but you can, mix it up. You can randomize the image that goes. You can show an image of the stage as opposed to showing the stage on the level select where I do, or on top of that as well. So there's lots of options here. I wanted to cover this when we just got done level streaming, because loading screens without level streaming, like I said earlier in the episode, is basically just you call open level and you put in this arbitrary loading symbol, which really isn't good. I mean, it's fine. It does what it needs to do, but it's not really loading anything while it's doing that. It's more like you call load, you create that widget and then you open level. So it's really just a arbitrary thing that's being done. But with level streaming, it is actually loading while that is happening, so it's perfectly fine to have that. Now, one thing I did do is I put a delay. So if I take away my delay, then it's going to load really quickly, which is what we want. You won't really be able to see it in this episode is the thing. See how quick that loading screen was? And so I put in the delay arbitrarily for now so that you guys can see it. However, I will, of course, be removing it because quick loading is good. And trust me, as we get more and more advanced, more logic, more, animated stages, whatever, it is going to want to take longer to load. So it will be a little bit slower. All right, guys, so let's get started. Just to get everyone caught up, I believe this is episode 94. So we've done 93 other episodes. We're pretty far along in the series. Don't worry, we have so much more to go. So much more. But if you'd like to catch up, I'll leave the entire playlist right here for the fighting game tutorial series. I will also go ahead and leave the level streaming instances and episodes right here. I'll leave the first one anyway. There's two. And that way you can follow them if you'd like, if you just want to know kind of how we're doing the level streaming and how our system works so that you can implement the load. All right. So there's a few things we need to do. First of all, we need to know when we want to add our loading icon and when we want to remove it. And we also want to know when we want to use the loading symbol or icon versus the loading screen. Now, in some games, they are interchangeable. So in some cases, you will have a loading icon only. Say you're in the middle of a cutscene and it's trying to load something in the background. Sometimes you actually will see a loading symbol or something like that in the corner. You can also have them if you're in the middle of gameplay and it's auto-saving, like a symbol for that. Same thing. Yeah, it's saving, but often you'll have a little symbol for loading as well. I know some games even tell you that during like the splash screens. Like, this is what this symbol means. And so you have to choose, if you want both of them and when, or if you want the loading screen and how we can do that. So I'm going to show you how to do both. You can use one or the other or both, whatever you want. I have a method to just swap between them by changing 2 lines, but we may end up incorporating both of them into the game one way or another. So what I've done is I've gone to where I add my widgets, and I've added two, a loading icon and a loading screen. Let's start with the loading icon because it's pretty simple. So I've made a custom symbol here. I've just literally taken 4 parallelograms and, sorry, 6 of them, not 4, if I could count. And I've just kind of lined them up into this circular pattern, and I just spin the whole thing. It's really simple. I did it in about 2 minutes, so feel free to spend some more time on it and make it look really nice. But anyway, I have this image that I've called loading icon 1. And in my new widget that I made, and sorry, I'm skipping a step. In case you need to make a new widget, go to Add New, Blueprints, and sorry, User Interface and Widget Blueprint. And then when you get into here, add an image to the screen, so you can literally just drag it. And I've called it the loading icon image. And I've given it the image that I want to use for my loading. And all I've done, because I don't have an actual animation for my loading, is I create an animation in here. But if you have like a specific loading symbol that you could actually use or import into Unreal, feel free to use that. That's not going to matter. This is all just for looks. So I won't go too far into this, but just to kind of show you what I've done so that you can replicate this if you'd like. So I took my image and I've added an animation to it. So the way you do this, if you've never done it before, is you can go up to Window up at the top and click on Animations when you're in a widget or any sort of blueprint that can handle this. When you do this, it will open up a window somewhere. For me, it always is down here, but I have seen it other places pop up for people. And you can click plus animation. Okay, and we can make a new one just as an example so I can show you everything I've done. So I can say reverse animate loading icon. All right, and then what I want to do is I want to grab my widget that I'm going to be animating, which is my loading icon image. You could pick the canvas panel slot, but really that just means, oh, it's this spot under the canvas panel. So for what I do, I always like to use the actual image itself or the item itself. That way, if things change around or if I unparent this, whatever, then it fits. Make sure you do apply proper scaling and everything. I'll leave an iCard right there if you want to see how to scale this to your screen size properly. I will be adding that. Okay, so for this guy, it's very simple. What I've done in my other animation was just spin him. So we'll do the same thing, but backward. So I can put a track in here, plus track, and transform. Then I can open up transform to access the rotation. And since this is a 2D widget, I only have one way to rotate it. And thus, that's what we're going to do. So essentially, this timeline tells you how long this animation is going to be. So this is 1 second worth of time. I can add a keyframe here for the angle of rotation. And then I can make this negative 360 degrees. And so what that means is within 1 second, it will go from 0 to negative 360. The negative isn't important. The reason I specify it is because the other one I went from 0 to 360. And I'm showing you another animation, so I'm showing you the reverse animate loading icon. So I put a negative, so it spins the other way. And so literally, what that means is in 1 second, it will spin the entire way around, just like that. Okay, so this is my animation that I'm using, and this is the new one that I made. It's really that simple. Very, very simple. Okay. And there you go. So that's your animation. Now we do have to play this animation on this icon. It won't play by default. We just created it, and that's testing it to show what it looks like. So if you go into your graph on event construct, you can do it, because I feel like once the loading icon is up, you probably want to start doing it right away. You want to grab your animation. So I grabbed animate loading icon. We could also do the new one that I made. But either way, just drag it onto the screen. Get it. And drag off and say play animation. Okay? Just like this. So that's how I've got these two nodes here. Now, there is something important here. The num loops to play will be 1 by default. Put it to 0. Since this is an animation for a loading icon, we want it to keep looping as long as necessary. So until we're sure that everything is loaded, we want to keep looping. So if you put it to 0, as it says in this comment, 0 to loop indefinitely. So if you put it to 0, it will keep looping forever. Feel free to change these other things if you want to, but I didn't need to. And there you go. That's my loading icon widget. Pretty simple stuff, not bad. We can go ahead and make the other widget now if you'd like. So just make a new widget blueprint. I call it loading screen. This one's not as, I didn't do any sort of animations with it. What I've done is I've added a background image. So I brought an image onto the screen. I set it to be the center anchor here. Or excuse me, I set it to be actually this anchor here, the fill anchor. And just made it the proper size. I changed the brush tint to be completely black. And then I've added 2 text widgets. So one for the title and one for the description. The title is also anchored at the bottom. This one. And I've just set some things up. It's really not that important. The settings, I just made the title a little bit bigger, text and bold, and I made the description a little bit smaller and regular. Put in some basic text, but so you have a title here like new to the game, and then here's what you can do to get better, something like that. Now make sure these are both variables. So you click on the text and check is variable for both of these. Now, same deal with the loading screen as it was with the loading icon. We want to actually be able to, see something when it loads. So in this case, I want to show a title and a tip description. So I'm going to get into doing this after we get the other loading stuff in, because this is going to be, I'm going to show you how to set all this up, but this is going to be something that isn't required to get loading to work, and I don't want to switch to that before we have the loading icon set up. So let's set up all the rest of the loading, but now you have your 2 widgets, and then I'll show you how to get the tips and customize the tips and titles that show up on that screen at the end. All right. So it's actually pretty simple. What we need to do is have a method in which we can spawn this widget and remove it at the proper times. So remember, at this point, I have my delay in here still. So you can see my widget plays, and then when the level actually streams in, the widget goes away, and we just go to the level. So how did that work? Well, we have events when things fire, such as event load level, where we can, we know for a fact that this is when we're going to start streaming in a level. We also have events in other level blueprints, such as the stages themselves, that have level loaded, so we know once this event fires, this is when the stage is already loaded. So we know we're essentially done loading, or we should be done loading when this occurs, which means we can remove the icon. So with that, we know exactly where we need to add these things, as well as there's a few other places. We're going to add it to our pause menu and versus end menu when we're going back to the main menu and different things like that. Just to be safe, we should have it everywhere where we're transitioning levels. Anytime we need to stream anything in and it's not going to be completely instant, and we don't want to necessarily hitch for a bit, we can always add it. But as a rule of thumb, anytime we change stages by streaming in a level or streaming out another level, we should probably have the loading icon. And because we're going to be using this so much, I've made functions called add loading icon and remove loading icon. I've added them to something called base function library. So base function library is, I went over it in the last episode if you watched that, where we did clean up all match data. However, long story short, all it really is I have a blueprint in here called base function library. What it is it is a blueprint function library. And again, I'll explain it. So a blueprint function library essentially makes functions that can be used in pretty much any blueprint or anywhere throughout your project, but it doesn't contain any data to itself. Like, you can make variables and stuff and add them in here, but it doesn't contain any context of the world. It just does what you tell it to, and it will try and do that from any file. So in this case, what I've done is I've made 2 more functions, and I've made one add loading icon, one remove loading icon. And I've handled it for both the loading icon and the loading screen. They're very, very simple functions, but since we're calling them in seriously probably about 8 to 10 places already, and we're going to be using it more, it's definitely worthy enough to be a function. So, long story short, an add loading icon, I just do create widget, just like that. And then I pass in the proper class, so loading icon and loading screen. And then when I want to swap between these two, I just change which one I'm going to. And then I add it to the viewport. Then for remove loading icon, we should only ever have one loading icon for at least per game instance. So in multiplayer, each player might have one, but we should only ever have one. So to be safe, I just remove all of them if there's somehow more than one. You can get a world context here if you want. Just like this. It's not actually necessary here. It's not necessary when you do things that remove everything, because you don't need a context for that. You're not trying to remove it from a specific spot. You're going to remove it from literally everywhere, so you don't need the context. But feel free to add it. It could be a good thing down the line, and also so it helps you understand the world context a bit better. But I get all widgets of class. I get my loading icon or my loading screen class. I do have it top level only for now because those widgets don't have any children. I loop through them, and then I remove them from parent. So basically, I get rid of all the loading screen and loading icon widgets. And now we can call them from anywhere. So let's start doing it. In my main menu, event load level. This is pretty much our main event that we made for level streaming for transition between the menu to a specific stage. In here, what I've done is I was calling load stream level, and then I was calling clean up all match data, and then going on to this stuff. But we want to actually do this in a certain order. So clean up all match data will actually go ahead and remove all widgets, period. Which is fine. We actually do want that when we're going back to our menu. But of course, we don't want to do that after spawning the loading icon, or it will also be removed. So I've now moved the clean up all match data to the first thing in the event load level before load stream level. And then I add loading icon after. I actually add it before I start streaming the level, just so that it will show up for the player to know we're going to be doing this operation. There's no hitch while things are loading that stops the icon from showing up, or the tip screen from showing up. This delay, again, is arbitrary. It's definitely not something you should keep, but if you can't see your screen because your game loads too quickly, then it's good to put one in here as a test or to slow it down so you can work with it. And then we call load stream level as usual. Again, all this stuff is the same. I just changed the order around of this node, and then I've added this one in between. Okay. Next, an event trigger load level logic in the main menu level blueprint. I call it remove loading icon. This is important because event trigger load level logic is the one that gets called. So say when you're going back to the main menu from the pause menu or from the end of match screen, we do want to remove the loading icon because I'm going to spawn it when we return to the main menu. So you want to get rid of it when the main menu actually loads and when this event can be called. If this event is being called, then the level is definitely being loaded or has loaded fully. Okay, and I don't change anything else about any of these other guys. Now, if we go to our maps, every single stage looks the same. We have level loaded, and then we have these three nodes. This basically, instead of performing logic on the game mode's begin play, we now call it whenever we stream this level in. Well, since we created the loading icon right here, add loading icon, then we want to remove it when the level is actually loaded. So in all of your levels and all your level BPs, make sure in the level loaded event, when we know that the stage has been loaded, we remove the loading icon or the screen. Just to show you, I do it in all of them. Okay, they all look exactly the same, just so that we're fully transparent here. All 4 of the stages are exactly the same. All right, I'm going to close these. Cool. And so that's pretty simple. Let's open up our widgets for our pause menu and our versus end menu. Get them squared away. So the other way we can transition between levels is not just from the main menu and the character select, but from these menus. So we have the ability to rematch, which currently is not being level streamed. That is just resetting the variables within the game mode, which is perfectly fine. It's actually not an issue. You could stream in the level, unstream and stream it back in if you'd like. But I'm leaving that alone for now because it's just really not necessary, like I said. But we do have the ability to go to the main menu from the pause menu. So let's go to our on press quit to main menu button. Now the logic we have here was all set up last episode as well, so don't worry about it too much. Just do what we did last time in the main menu level blueprint. See, we unloaded the currently streaming level. This is our stage. And then I call clean up all match data. Since I've cleaned up all the match data, all the widgets are going to be gone. And at that point, it's our cue to add our loading icon to the screen. It has to be after this, otherwise it's going to be deleted. Or, well, it's going to be removed from the parent. So call it after that. And then that's before we load the main menu. So they'll see this loading icon. And then the main menu will start streaming. And then once it's in, once we get into the main menu, it's calling this event, which I already said removes the loading icon. We just make sure everywhere we add it, we'll remove it at any of the branches it can go. Whatever path it ends up leading to, we need to make sure it can get removed. It's that simple. That's all the only change we need for the versus pause menu. For the versus end pop-up, if we do that one, it's the same deal. Yeah, this is the quit to main menu yet again. We clean up the match data, so I call add loading icon. Then we load the stream level to the main menu and trigger that event. So guess what happens? It removes the loading icon. It's slightly different up above. So I also have the ability to go to the character select screen from the versus end menu. So if we go to the character select screen, we do want to add the loading icon again because it could take some time to unload the current level and to load the character select screen because we're loading the main menu again and then we're going to pop up the widget. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the loading icon. We are not calling trigger load level logic because we don't do that when we create the character select screen. Instead, we just spawn the widget here. So in that case, what I do is I stream the main menu level in, and once I know it's done streaming, say the completed node, then I remove loading icon here. And then I create the character select as normal. So if I were to play this and show you those methods, I did set the round of the game mode rounds to 1. So if I just mash my opponent here, maybe throwing a throw if I'm feeling generous, then I'm going to win the round right away. He's going to run up to the camera, do his little victory animation, and then we can do character select. We can also use our keys because we have that set up. So say character select. It was probably hard to see, but if you go back and look at it, this will have popped up. I didn't have a delay here, so that's why it was hard to see. But you will have seen the loading icon. It is there. And then it went away as soon as this level loaded. We can also go back into it. Whoops. We can also go back into it. I don't even need to select a character because I have a default set up. You know, we add our loading icon again because we're on our stage. Looks like I need to rebuild lighting because lighting is getting destroyed currently on here and dropping my frame rate. And also all the characters look very wrong. But yeah, so anyway, we beat our opponent again. And now let's go to main menu. You saw it pop up for a short second. Again, no delay, so it's very quick. But it popped up, and when the main menu loaded, it went away. Last instance, if we load this up one final time. Again, lighting needs to be rebuilt, so excuse that. I will do that for next time. Also, reflection captures. Now, if I go to the main menu from the pause menu, you can see that it popped up for just a second. Again, it does it so quickly because there's no delay, which is good, but it's kind of hard to show you in this case. So you should see that the loading symbol popped up and was removed properly for all of those. And that was our goal. And so again, if you want the loading screen in here, you just switch to this other one that is the loading screen widget and add it to the viewport, and then remove the loading screen widget. And just note, you'll see sometimes when you're like loading in with level streaming, since it isn't such a like, oh, we're on this level now, and it does require some loading. You see some weird things like this. It's actually just because of where my camera is that it's loading right then, and my camera is over that section in the persistent level. So what you can do to solve those issues is A, if you use the loading screen, it won't be a problem because you have a widget that's covering what you see on the camera, and thus you won't need to block anything. However, like when you go back to the main menu, let's do it again. So however, if you load it, and you could also put the camera somewhere where it would see something that wasn't loading in. So you could potentially put it somewhere where nothing was streaming in, you know, only things that were already streamed in, and you could see a 3D view of whatever it is you want to look at without looking at random things for these little times when it says, yes, I'm done streaming, but we haven't switched over the logic yet. So just so you know, it's very easily solvable. You might just have to do a little bit of fiddling with it. You might have to move the camera around so that it is looking at something that's loaded in. You might have to put a screen in front of it. That way you don't see these little, like, sometimes when you start the game, you'll see it too. Like, you'll see it's kind of popping up that widget because the level is actually loaded in the background. Same deal. Like, you could actually wait to load the press any key screen until you knew that it was up. There's a lot of things we can do for that, so don't worry. No stress over that. All right. And now at this point, I think we're ready to go to the loading screen. I just want to get all the loading stuff in so that you kind of knew the flow. At this point, it'll just be switching the area here in the add loading and remove loading icon to be the screen instead. And then I'm going to get rid of the main menu level BP because we don't need it. I'm going to get rid of the loading icon because we don't need it. So right now, I'm just going to leave the base function library with these two paths taken to spawn our loading screen, and I'll leave this guy open. So we have this already set up. The only thing we need is the graph, which is, I have one thing, which is event construct. However, we need to know where we're going to grab our titles and descriptions of our tips from. So I know a good example of this is like PUBG or Apex Legends, and tons of games do this, where they have like a title and then they have words underneath of it, usually tips or little jokes or something, and that's what we're doing here. Now, where do these come from? You could have an array in your loading screen if you want. It'd be very simple. You just make a variable that is an array of strings. I've actually used a data table for two reasons. One, a data table is read-only at runtime. So what that means is you can't edit it at runtime. You can only edit it, you know, when the game isn't running. However, that makes it very, very efficient to use. When something is not editable at runtime, it is insanely quick to use. It has read-only access. And so this is actually very, very good in performance, which, not that one array is going to hurt you. However, we are loading at the time of these popping up, so we do want to be as efficient as possible to make sure that our loading is not slowed down at all. However, like I said, it's probably not necessary to use a data table, but the other reason that I want to is because we are definitely going to be using data tables and databases throughout our project. In fact, we're going to be using it for a lot of our frame data when we get that system fully set up. And so because of that, we probably want to have this all prepared. And we want to be a little bit experienced with it. So I do have a more advanced data table episode. Not really more advanced, but I go more in depth than I will go here. It's just an overarching data table episode. So you can check that out. I'll leave in this iCard. But otherwise, I'm going to go over it, so don't worry. What I've done is I've added a data table and a structure. Data tables have to be built off of a structure or class of some type. So if you add new, I just made a blueprint structure. Add new blueprints and structure. You click this. Call it whatever you want. I call it F loading tip. And I've made two variables. You just click new variable. You'll probably already have one by default. So call it title and make it a string. And then you can make a new one, and I call it description. Made it a string. You could also make them names or text or whatever. There's tons of things you could do. That's just what I've decided to do. And it's that simple. This is the same as like a coding structure that we use. Like you see how we have, these are all enums. But you see how we have this uStruct? This is really the same thing. This is a blueprint structure. But we don't need this in code for any reason. These tips are coming up on the widget only, so I'm not really worried about storing them in code. If you wanted to, you absolutely could. All you have to do is make a code structure somewhere that can be accessed, probably game mode, maybe even game instance. And then use that structure when you're creating your data table. Okay, so I have this structure. And then what I've done is I've added new miscellaneous data table. When you do this, it will pop up a box. And it will let you pick these structs that you can use to fill out the data table. I don't know why. Whenever you make a custom structure, like my loading tip here, I always seem to get 2. I don't know if it's a bug or what the purpose is. However, I picked both of them many, many times, trying to figure out exactly what is different about them, and I never find anything different. So you can click on either one, just choose your new structure. I'm going to cancel because I've already made it, and I called this loading tips. So F loading tip is a structure, and then loading tips is the data table that holds this data. Okay. All right. Now when you come in here, this will be completely empty. You might start with 1 row, but I actually did not. So you just hit add, and this will add a new row to the table. It'll look like this. You'll have 1. This is like the numbering of how many you have, but then you also have this row name that'll be titled like new row or something, some garbage like that. I usually like to ignore the numbers at the front, the 1 and the 2. You can use that for counting how many rows you have, but I don't really use that for anything. So I like to instead change the row name from like new row to the index or the element. So you can right click on this and say rename, and it will let you change it. So instead of new row, I change it to 0 and 1 and so on. You don't have to do that. You can use whatever you want, but this makes it easier for me to parse this data, and I'll show you how we end up doing that in a second. But since we used our new floating tip structure, then we can fill out all of that data in that structure for each element. So in our first one here, we have a title and description. So fill it out. New to fighting games? Try out practice mode to hone your skills. Or, like the characters, they all come from mixmo.com. You can add as many as you want. You could seriously probably add hundreds, thousands in here, and you wouldn't see any lag because it's that quick. Not that you would see lag from one individual thing, but we might as well be efficient while we can, and it doesn't hurt anything. Unless you're going to let the users add their own loading tips, there's really no reason for it to ever not be a data table in this case. This is something the users will never edit or change, and we won't need to change in the middle of the game. At least not to my knowledge, you know. If you have a special case, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure you account for that. But it's that simple. I literally fill out the data. I keep the row name as 0 and 1. Now that is going to be important because let's go to our loading screen. Now on event construct is when I want to do this. All I want to do really is set our loading text title and loading text description to the text from the data table at the row. So it's going to pick a random tip and display it to the screen. That's really what we're trying to achieve here. To do that, what I do is I get a random integer with the max as the highest index of our data table. Now, you can actually get the data table number of rows and things like that and put that in as the random integer. But for now, I'm just going to keep it as 2 because we only have 2. Okay, so I just do random integer like that. And the max, it'll tell you in this comment, so it finds a random number between 0 and max minus 1. Well, I have 0 as my row name and 1 for my row name for this one. So if I put 2 in there, it goes from 0 to 2 minus 1, which is 1. So 0 to 1, which are the 2 elements that I have, okay? Now bear with me on this next part. What I want to do is do something called get data table row. This will return the elements at that row. And what you normally do is fill in the row name. And it's a string, or it's actually it's a name. And so you could put in row name, right? If that was your name, the name of your row. But instead of doing that, what I've done instead is I've used integers. So we want to pass it the random integer that we find at that name. However, if you try and do int to name, it won't work. So what you have to do is int to string. So if you drag off the toString integer, and then drag off of that, and you can plug it in string to name. It does convert. Then make sure you select the proper data table. I only have one, so loading tips. And that's how you get what I have here. I'm just going to keep doing it underneath so you can see how it works. So then we can drag off the out row and break it, which gets us all the variables within that structure. So we have our title and our description. From here, it's pretty simple. We want to set our title and our description to these values. So if you drag your text onto the screen, this is why I said these have to be variables earlier, so that we can use them in the graph. If you drag this onto the screen, you can type set text, text in parentheses, and then you can drag the title in, and it will do a conversion to text string. I'm not going to make it as neat as I did above, but something like that. And then you set this one, and then guess what? You do the next one. You do loading text description, get it, set text, text, and then you take the description and pass it into the text. All right, and now I'm going to delete this one because I've just copied everything that I have above it. So now we're here where we get a random row and all the elements of the table. We get a random row. We break the structure to get the title and the description, and then we set the variables of the title and the description to the variables that we have in our data table, and thus these pieces of text update with what we have. And so once again, if I were to play the game, you would see this widget with the loading tip, and then it would bring us to the level when it's fully streamed in, and we are good to go. Alright guys, and that's all I got for you today, so thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe. It does more for me and the channel than anything else, and I can just really appreciate it. We're almost at 100 episodes. 100 episodes of the fighting game. Very, very excited. I'm going to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon members and supporters. Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for all the love and support. I really, really appreciate it. Can't even tell you how much. Thank you. If you had any issues with this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. I'd be happy to assist you and get you all solved for whatever problems you had. And yep, that's all I got for you guys today. So thank you once again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, guys. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you later.